Fursum, Part 5. A Glimpse of Humanity's Dream. Inspired by the simulation and their growing understanding of humanity, Kale proposed an idea that would take their studies to a new level. They suggested attending a global summit where leaders from around the world gathered to discuss solutions to pressing issues like climate change, poverty, and inequality. It was a bold move, stepping away from controlled environments into the heart of human collaboration, but Kale believed it was essential for seeing humanity's aspirations in action. Professor Liren hesitated at first. Such events are unpredictable, she cautioned. Humans can be emotional, irrational, and prone to conflict even in settings meant for cooperation. Kyle nodded, but stood firm. That's exactly why we should go, they replied. If we want to understand humanity, we need to witness how they navigate challenges together, not just in simulations but in real life. After some deliberation, the delegation agreed to attend the summit under strict conditions. They would remain cloaked and observe quietly, avoiding any direct interference. With their advanced technology, blending into the background was easy, allowing them to experience the event without drawing attention. The summit took place in a sprawling convention center, surrounded by lush gardens and reflective pools. Inside, delegates from dozens of nations filled the halls, their conversations echoing through corridors adorned with flags representing unity and diversity. Panels discussed everything from renewable energy initiatives to education reforms, while workshops brainstormed innovative ways to tackle global hunger and disease. Kyle wandered among the attendees, absorbing the energy of the gathering. There was a palpable sense of urgency mixed with determination, a shared belief that despite the enormity of the challenges ahead, progress was possible if everyone worked together. One session particularly captivated Kale, a panel on post-conflict recovery led by survivors of war-torn regions. Speakers included former child soldiers turned activists, widows who had rebuilt their communities, and diplomats who brokered fragile peace agreements. Each story was unique, yet connected by a common thread: the refusal to let despair define their futures. A young woman named Layla spoke about her village in a region devastated by civil war. "We lost everything," she said, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Homes, schools, loved ones. But we didn't lose hope. We came together, not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. Today, our children go to school again. Our farms produce food again, and though scars remain, so does our resolve to build something better." Her words resonated deeply with Kale, who saw parallels between Layla's journey and the stories they'd heard in Amara's hometown. Humanity's resilience wasn't just about surviving adversity. It was about thriving in its aftermath, creating beauty from brokenness. Later that day, Kale witnessed a moment that left an indelible mark. During a closed-door meeting between rival nations, tensions flared as disagreements over resource allocation threatened to derail negotiations. Voices rose, accusations flew, and it seemed the session might collapse entirely. But then, an elderly diplomat stood up, his weathered face etched with wisdom earned through decades of service. "Let us not forget why we are here," he said softly, his tone cutting through the chaos. "We have all suffered losses. We have all made mistakes. But today we have a chance to do something greater than ourselves, to leave behind a legacy of peace for future generations. Let us choose hope over hatred, cooperation over competition." His words struck a chord. Slowly, the room quieted as delegates reconsidered their positions. Compromises were reached, agreements signed, and when the session ended, hands were shaken across tables that had moments earlier been battlegrounds. Back at the delegation's base, Kale shared their observations with the group. For once, there was no debate, only silence as the students processed what they had seen. Even Tara, typically quick to dismiss humanity's positive traits, admitted, "There is something remarkable about their ability to come together, even after so much division." Professor Liren nodded approvingly. "This is why we study other species," she said, "to remind ourselves that growth often comes from struggle. Perhaps humanity's greatest strength lies not in their perfection, but in their imperfection, their willingness to try, fail, and try again. Encouraged by the shift in perspective, Cale decided to organize a final activity before their mission concluded. They invited the entire delegation to join them in exploring grassroots movements led by ordinary citizens striving to make the world a better place. From environmental activists planting trees in deforested areas to volunteers teaching literacy skills in underserved communities, these efforts showcased humanity's capacity for compassion and innovation. One evening, as the group visited a community theater performance celebrating cultural diversity, Kyle felt a surge of pride, not just for humanity, but for their peers. The skepticism that had once defined the delegation was giving way to curiosity and admiration. Though differences remained, there was a newfound respect for humanity's dreams and determination. As the trip drew to a close, Kyle reflected on how far they had come since their arrival. What started as a mission to study humanity's flaws had transformed into a journey of discovery, one that challenged preconceived notions and revealed unexpected truths. Humanity wasn't perfect, but neither was it irredeemable. In their struggles, failures, and triumphs, humans embodied a spirit of resilience and hope that transcended fear. On their final night, Cale stood beside Amara, gazing at the stars above. "You've taught me so much," Kyle said, their voice filled with gratitude. "About forgiveness, unity, and the power of dreams." Amara smiled warmly. "And you've reminded me that even when we feel alone, there are others watching, learning, and believing in us. Maybe someday we'll work together, not just as humans, but as part of something bigger." Kyle nodded, knowing this wasn't the end of their journey, but the beginning of a deeper connection. As they prepared to return home, carrying lessons that would shape their society for generations to come, Cale realized one thing for certain. Humanity's light shone brightly, not despite its flaws, but because of them. And in that light, there was infinite possibility. Part 6. Facing Opposition. As the delegation's time on Earth neared its end, Cale found themselves at a crossroads. The journey had been transformative, not just for them, but for many of their peers. Yet not everyone was ready to embrace the complexities of humanity they had uncovered. Some students clung stubbornly to their initial beliefs, unwilling to let go of the idea that humans were defined solely by their flaws. This divide came to a head when Cale proposed revising their final report to reflect a more nuanced understanding of humanity. The suggestion sparked immediate controversy. During a heated meeting in their temporary base, Cale laid out their argument. "Our mission was to study humanity objectively," they began, addressing the group with calm determination. "But objectivity doesn't mean ignoring evidence that challenges our assumptions. Humans are far more than their wars and conflicts. They dream, create, and collaborate in ways we never anticipated." Tara, who had softened somewhat during their earlier discussions, now pushed back fiercely. "You're romanticizing them," she snapped. "Yes, they have moments of cooperation, but those are exceptions. The bigger picture is clear. Humanity is driven by fear and greed. Acknowledging anything else would be dishonest." Cale took a deep breath, choosing their words carefully. "I'm not denying their flaws, but focusing only on the negative paints an incomplete picture. Look at what we've seen. Their resilience after disasters, their ability to forgive enemies, their efforts to protect the planet for future generations. These aren't anomalies. They're integral parts of who they are." Professor Liren listened intently before interjecting. "Cale raises valid points, but revising the report is a significant decision. It requires consensus. If we present humanity as anything other than inherently flawed, it could undermine our credibility within the Valith collective." Her caution resonated with some members of the group who worried about facing criticism back home. Others, however, were swayed by Cale's passion. One student named Rin, who had previously remained quiet, spoke up hesitantly. Maybe Cale is right. I've seen things here that made me question my own biases. Humans aren't perfect, but neither are we." Shouldn't our report reflect that? The room erupted into debate, voices overlapping as opinions clashed. For every argument supporting revision, another countered with skepticism. Tensions escalated until Kale stepped forward, raising their hands to quiet the group. "This isn't just about us," they said firmly. "It's about doing justice to the species we came here to study. If we leave with half-truths, we fail, both humanity and ourselves." Their words struck a chord, silencing the room momentarily. Even Tara seemed to waver, though she quickly masked her uncertainty with defiance. "Fine," she said curtly. "If you believe so strongly in this, defend your position. Convince us all." With no time to waste, Kale prepared for what felt like the most important presentation of their life. Drawing on everything they'd learned, from Amara's stories of reconciliation to the inspiring moments witnessed at the Global Summit, they crafted an impassioned case for humanity's potential. They highlighted examples of cooperation, innovation. Part 1. Arrival of Curiosity. The silver spacecraft descended silently through Earth's atmosphere, its sleek surface shimmering like liquid metal under the sun. It landed gently in a wide clearing surrounded by lush green forests, chosen carefully to avoid disturbing human life until introductions could be made. Inside the craft, a group of young alien students from the Valith Collective prepared themselves for their first encounter with humanity. They were here as part of an educational mission, a chance to study this peculiar species that had fascinated and baffled their kind for centuries. The Valith were not newcomers to interstellar diplomacy. Their civilization spanned dozens of star systems united by a philosophy of peace and cooperation. For millennia, they had resolved disputes without resorting to violence, relying instead on logic, empathy, and mutual understanding. To them, war was a concept so alien it might as well have been fiction. Yet humanity, with its countless conflicts throughout history, intrigued them deeply. Why did humans fight each other so often? Was it fear, greed, or something else entirely? Among the students was Kyle, a curious and thoughtful individual who stood out even among their peers. While most of the others approached the mission with detached academic interest, Kale felt a spark of excitement mixed with unease. They had read all the reports about Earth, the towering cities, the vast oceans, the endless variety of cultures, but nothing could prepare them for what lay ahead. As the ship's ramp lowered and the crisp scent of Earth's air wafted inside, Kale realized this would be more than just a learning experience. It might change how they saw the universe and themselves. Their initial observations began almost immediately. The delegation traveled in small groups accompanied by discreet cloaking technology to observe humans unnoticed at first. They wandered through bustling urban centers where neon lights reflected off glass skyscrapers, and markets overflowed with colorful goods. In quieter rural areas, they watched farmers tending fields and children playing near rivers. Humanity seemed chaotic yet strangely harmonious, a paradox the Valith struggled to comprehend. One event, however, left a lasting impression on the entire group. During their third day on Earth, they stumbled upon a military parade in a large city square. Soldiers marched in perfect formation, their boots striking the pavement in unison. Tanks rolled slowly down the street, their polished surfaces gleaming under the midday sun. Overhead fighter jets roared past in tight formations, leaving trails of smoke and patriotic colors against the blue sky. To the Valith, the spectacle was both mesmerizing and horrifying. "This is how they celebrate?" one student whispered, their voice tinged with disbelief. "By showcasing tools of destruction?" Another nodded grimly. "It confirms what we've always thought. Humans are obsessed with war because they fear it." But Kale wasn't so sure. Something about the scene didn't sit right. Amidst the thunderous applause and cheering crowds, Kale noticed a man standing quietly at the edge of the square. He wore a simple suit and held a folded flag in his hands. His eyes glistened as he watched the procession pass by. Intrigued, Kale used their scanning device to pick up fragments of his thoughts. The words came through faintly but clearly. "Thank you for your sacrifice." Later that evening, when the delegation gathered to discuss their findings, Kyle brought up the moment. "I think there's more to these displays than fear," they said hesitantly. "That man, he wasn't celebrating war. He was honoring those who fought to protect others." Professor Liren, their mentor and guide, frowned slightly. "Kyle, emotions can cloud judgment. We must remain objective. From our data, it's clear that humanity's fixation on war stems from primal instincts, fear of loss, competition for resources, and territorial aggression. Their parades only reinforce those tendencies." Kyle wanted to argue but held back. Instead, they resolved to dig deeper. If humanity truly feared war, why did they build monuments to peacemakers? Why did artists paint scenes of reconciliation instead of battlefields? And why did survivors of conflict speak of hope rather than despair? Over the next few days, Kale ventured farther from the group, eager to explore beyond the curated experiences arranged by their instructors. One afternoon, they found themselves outside a museum dedicated to World War II. Though hesitant at first, Kale decided to enter, hoping to gain insight into one of humanity's darkest chapters. Inside, they moved silently through exhibits filled with photographs, letters, and artifacts. There were images of devastation, burnt cities, displaced families, mass graves, but also stories of resistance, courage, and unlikely friendships, forged in the face of adversity. In one corner of the museum, a video played on loop. It showed elderly men and women sharing memories of surviving concentration camps, bombings, and invasions. Their voices trembled with emotion, but their messages were consistent. Never forget. Learn from our mistakes. Build a better world. Kyle lingered there longer than intended, absorbing every word. By the time they left the museum, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the streets. As they walked back toward the delegation's temporary base, Kyle couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's relationship with war was far more nuanced than their textbooks suggested. That night, lying awake in their quarters, Kyle replayed the day's events in their mind. The military parade, the grieving man, the museum, each piece hinted at a larger puzzle waiting to be solved. Perhaps humanity didn't fear war because it was inevitable. Maybe they feared losing the things that made life worth fighting for. Love, freedom, hope. With renewed determination, Kale vowed to uncover the truth, not just for themselves but for their skeptical peers. Little did they know this quest would lead them far beyond the boundaries of their original mission, challenging everything they thought they knew about humanity and themselves. Part 2. Lessons in History. The next morning, Kale approached Professor Liren with a request that caught the mentor slightly off guard. "I'd like permission to delve deeper into Earth's historical archives," Kale said firmly but respectfully. "If we're going to understand humanity's relationship with war, we need more than surface-level observations." Liren hesitated. For a moment, their translucent skin shimmering faintly as they considered the proposal. "Very well," they finally agreed, though their tone carried a note of caution. "But remember, Kale, history is often written by the victors. Be wary of biases." Kale nodded eagerly and set off to explore Earth's digital libraries, a vast repository of knowledge spanning centuries. The Valith had access to advanced technology that allowed them to sift through data quickly, translating languages and analyzing patterns in moments. Yet despite their efficiency, Kale soon discovered that humanity's past was anything but straightforward. At first glance, the record seemed to confirm what the Valith already believed. Wars erupted over land, resources, ideologies, and power. Empires rose and fell on waves of conquest and rebellion. Entire civilizations were wiped out or assimilated into larger ones. It was a grim tapestry woven with threads of violence and suffering. But as Kale dug deeper, anomalies began to emerge. Stories that didn't fit neatly into the narrative of aggression and fear. They stumbled upon accounts of resistance movements, where ordinary people banded together to overthrow oppressive regimes. There were tales of soldiers risking their lives not just to kill, but to save others. Civilians trapped in war zones, comrades injured on the battlefield, even enemies left behind when retreat was ordered. One particular story caught Cale's attention: the Warsaw Ghetto uprising during World War II. A small group of Jewish fighters, vastly outnumbered and outgunned, had risen against an occupying force determined to exterminate them. Though the uprising ultimately failed, it became a symbol of defiance and resilience, a testament to the human spirit's refusal to surrender without a fight. Cale couldn't help but feel moved by such stories. To the Valeth, conflict resolution meant avoiding confrontation altogether. But here was evidence of individuals choosing to stand up, even when victory seemed impossible, because they believed in something greater than themselves. Determined to share these findings, Cale invited their fellow students to join them in reviewing the data. At first, the others listened politely, nodding along as Cale highlighted examples of heroism and sacrifice. But skepticism soon crept in. "This is all very poetic," remarked Tara, one of the more vocal members of the group, "but it doesn't change the fact that humans resort to violence far too easily. These acts of bravery you keep mentioning, they're exceptions, not the rule." Cale bristled at the dismissal but chose to respond calmly.
"Maybe they are exceptions," they admitted, "but exceptions can shape entire societies. Look at how these stories inspire future generations. Humans don't just remember wars, they remember the people who fought for peace, justice, and freedom." Tara shrugged dismissively. "It still proves our point."
Humanity is driven by chaos and destruction. Their heroes are born out of necessity, not choice. Frustrated but undeterred, Cale decided to take their investigation beyond the confines of digital archives. If raw data wasn't enough to convince, their peers' perhaps first-hand accounts would make a difference. With Professor Liren's reluctant approval, Cale ventured into the world once again, this time seeking direct interaction with humans. Their first essay, Wordit Tuir. Part 3. Bonds Beyond Borders. Cale's growing fascination with humanity's complexities led them to seek experiences that couldn't be found in archives or lectures. They wanted to see firsthand how people rebuilt their lives after conflict, how they transformed scars into bridges of understanding. It was during this phase of exploration that Cale met Amara, a young historian whose passion for reconciliation became a guiding light in their journey. The meeting happened almost by chance. While visiting a museum exhibit on post-conflict recovery, Cale noticed a woman speaking animatedly to a small group of visitors. Her name tag read, Amara Patel, and her voice carried both warmth and conviction as she described the rebuilding efforts in her hometown following a devastating civil war. Intrigued, Cale lingered nearby, listening intently. Amara spoke about how rival factions had once torn her community apart, leaving streets littered with rubble and hearts heavy with grief. But instead of giving up, the survivors came together to heal. Former enemies worked side by side to clear debris, rebuild homes, and create shared spaces where forgiveness could take root. She emphasized that healing wasn't easy. It required trust, patience, and countless difficult conversations, but it was worth every effort. After the talk, Cale approached Amara discreetly, using their cloaking device to remain unseen while initiating a telepathic connection. "Your story is remarkable," Cale said softly, their words translated into human language through advanced technology. "May I ask why you dedicate yourself to studying these moments of reconciliation?" Amara paused, surprised but not alarmed by the disembodied voice. After a moment, she smiled faintly. "Because history isn't just about what we've lost," she replied. "It's also about what we can gain if we choose to learn from our mistakes." Touched by her perspective, Cale revealed themselves, lowering their invisibility shield. Amara gasped at the sight of the alien visitor, tall, slender, with shimmering skin and large, expressive eyes, but quickly recovered her composure. "You're one of the observers, aren't you?" she asked, referring to the recent arrival. Of extraterrestrial students, Kyle nodded. "Yes, my name is Cale. I'm trying to understand humanity better, especially your relationship with war. Your work fascinates me." Amara laughed softly. Well, if you really want to understand, you should come to my hometown. Seeing it for yourself might answer some of your questions. And so, a few days later, Kale accompanied Amara to her village nestled in a valley surrounded by rolling hills. The landscape bore traces of its troubled past, abandoned buildings, overgrown fields, but signs of renewal were everywhere. Colorful murals adorned walls, children played in newly built parks, and market stalls buzzed with activity. Most striking of all were the people themselves, who greeted each other with smiles and handshakes, regardless of which side they'd once supported. Over the course of several days, Amara introduced Kyle to elders who had lived through the war. One afternoon, they sat in a cozy cafe with an elderly couple named Miriam and Hassan, their hands intertwined as they recounted harrowing stories of loss and survival. Miriam had lost her son to the fighting while Hassan's brother had been imprisoned by opposing forces. Yet here they were, sitting together like old friends. "We didn't forgive overnight," Miriam admitted, her voice steady despite the weight of memory. "But hatred only kept us trapped in the past. Forgiveness, it set us free." Hassan nodded. "We realized we weren't so different after all. We all wanted safety, dignity, and a future for our children. Once we saw that, working together became possible." Kyle listened intently, their mind racing with thoughts. To the Valith, peace meant avoiding conflict entirely. But here was proof that peace could also emerge from conflict, if nurtured, with care and determination. As the days passed, Kale grew closer to Amara, learning not just from her knowledge but from her spirit. She had a way of seeing beyond divisions, of finding common ground even in the most fractured situations. When Kale expressed admiration for her resilience, Amara simply shrugged. "It's not about being strong," she said. "It's about believing in something bigger than yourself. Hope keeps us moving forward." Back at the delegation's base, Kale struggled to reconcile their experiences with the skepticism of their peers. During a group discussion, they shared stories from Amara's village, the murals, the markets, the elders' testimonies, but encountered resistance. "These examples are rare," argued Tara, crossing her arms. "They don't represent the majority of human behavior." "They may be rare," Kale countered, "but rarity doesn't diminish their significance. Humans dream of peace even when surrounded by chaos. Don't you think that's worth studying?" Professor Liren interjected, attempting to mediate. "Kyle raises valid points, but let's not lose sight of our mission. Humanity's flaws are undeniable. Peaceful coexistence remains elusive for many." Kyle nodded reluctantly, acknowledging the truth in Liren's words. Yet, they couldn't shake the feeling that focusing solely on humanity's failures ignored the depth of their aspirations. That night, lying awake in their quarters, Kale reflected on everything they'd seen and heard. Humanity wasn't defined solely by its wars. It was shaped by its responses to them. From resistance fighters to peacemakers, from grieving parents to hopeful children, humans demonstrated a capacity for growth that transcended fear. Determined to bridge the gap between their own beliefs and those of their peers, Kale began drafting a proposal. They suggested extending their stay on Earth to explore more examples of reconciliation and cooperation. Perhaps, they reasoned, witnessing humanity's triumphs alongside its struggles would provide a fuller picture. When Kale presented the idea to the group, reactions were mixed. Some students remained unconvinced, clinging to their initial assumptions. Others, however, showed flickers of curiosity. Even Tara admitted, albeit grudgingly, that Kale's insights had made her reconsider certain biases. With Professor Liren's reluctant approval, the delegation agreed to extend their mission temporarily. For Kale, this victory felt bittersweet. They knew changing minds wouldn't happen overnight. But each step forward mattered. As they prepared for the next phase of their journey, Kale thought back to something Amara had said. "Hope isn't naive, it's brave." In that moment, Kale realized they weren't just studying humanity anymore. They were learning from it, and maybe, just maybe, becoming a little more human themselves. Part 4. The simulation exercise. The Valith Collective prided itself on immersive learning methods, and their program on Earth was no exception. As part of their curriculum, the alien students participated in a highly advanced simulation designed to mimic human decision-making during global crises. For Kale and their peers, this exercise promised to be both enlightening and challenging, and an opportunity to step into humanity's shoes and experience firsthand the complexities of leadership under pressure. The simulation began with each student assigned a role as the leader of a fictional nation facing escalating tensions with neighboring countries. Their task was simple in theory but daunting in practice: prevent conflict while addressing pressing issues like resource shortages, natural disasters, and misinformation campaigns. At first glance, it seemed straightforward enough. Allocate resources wisely, negotiate treaties, and maintain stability. But as the scenario unfolded, unexpected variables tested their ability to adapt and collaborate. Kyle found themselves leading a coalition of nations tasked with averting catastrophe after a massive earthquake devastated a shared region. Supplies were scarce, panic spread quickly, and rival factions accused one another of hoarding aid. The situation grew more volatile when rumors surfaced that one nation had secretly stockpiled food and medical supplies, sparking outrage among its neighbors. At first, Kale struggled to balance competing demands. Should they prioritize diplomacy or take decisive action? How could they ensure fairness without appearing weak? Frustration mounted as attempts at negotiation faltered, leaving Kale feeling overwhelmed. It wasn't until they remembered Amara's words about finding common ground that clarity began to emerge. Instead of focusing solely on accusations, Kyle proposed a joint relief effort. They suggested pooling available resources and establishing transparent distribution channels monitored by representatives from all participating nations. To build trust, Kale volunteered their own nation's limited reserves, emphasizing that survival required unity over competition. The move was risky. It left Kale's simulated population vulnerable, but it paid off. Other leaders, initially hesitant, followed suit, contributing what they could to the collective effort. Slowly but surely, tensions eased as people worked together to rebuild shattered communities. When the crisis finally subsided, Kale's coalition stood stronger than ever, bound by a newfound sense of cooperation. As the simulation concluded, the other students processed the results with mixed reactions. Some expressed admiration for Kale's approach, recognizing how acts of goodwill could diffuse hostility. Others remained skeptical, arguing that such outcomes were unrealistic given humanity's history of selfishness and greed. Professor Liren observed the discussion quietly before offering her analysis. "This exercise highlights an important truth," she said. "While humans may resort to aggression in times of fear or scarcity, they also possess the capacity for extraordinary collaboration." Asser, Part 7. A New Understanding. The journey back to the Valith homeworld was quiet but charged with anticipation. For Kale, it was a time of reflection, a chance to process everything they had experienced on Earth and prepare for the challenges ahead. The delegation's mission report, now a blend of perspectives, would soon be presented to the Valith Collective's Council of Scholars. While some students remained skeptical about humanity, others were eager to share their newfound admiration. Kale knew that presenting this revised narrative would not only test their resolve but also shape how their species viewed humans, and perhaps themselves, for generations to come. Upon arrival, the delegation was greeted with formal ceremonies and welcoming speeches. Their return marked the culmination of a highly anticipated educational expedition, one designed to deepen the Valith understanding of lesser-known civilizations. As Kyle stood among their peers in the Grand Assembly Hall, they couldn't help but notice the subtle differences between Earth and their own world. The polished silver walls gleamed under artificial light, devoid of the chaotic vibrancy that defined human cities. Everything here was orderly, precise, and free from conflict, but also lacking the raw emotion and unpredictability that made Earth so captivating. When the moment came to present their findings, Kyle stepped forward, their heart pounding despite their calm exterior. The holographic display flickered to life, projecting images of Earth's landscapes, cultures, and achievements. Kale began by acknowledging humanity's flaws, the wars, the environmental damage, the inequalities, but quickly transitioned to highlight their resilience, creativity, and capacity for cooperation. Humans are not perfect, Kale said, addressing the council. They make mistakes, sometimes catastrophic ones. But what sets them apart is their ability to learn from those mistakes. They dream of a better future and work tirelessly to achieve it, even when progress feels slow or uncertain. Kale shared stories of resistance fighters risking their lives for freedom, communities rebuilding after disasters, and global summits where leaders set aside differences to address shared challenges. They emphasized how humanity's struggles often led to innovation, art, and acts of kindness that transcended borders. To illustrate their point, Kale played recordings of voices from Earth, artists, activists, scientists, and ordinary citizens, all speaking passionately about hope, unity, and the power of dreams. As the presentation unfolded, the council members exchanged glances, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. Some leaned forward, intrigued by the complexity of human behavior, while others frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of celebrating imperfection. When Kale concluded, the room fell silent for several moments before questions began pouring. One elder scholar raised an eyebrow. "You suggest that humanity's capacity for destruction is matched by its capacity for creation. Yet isn't it dangerous to romanticize such contradictions? Shouldn't we focus on guiding them toward perfection rather than accepting their flaws?" Kale hesitated briefly before responding. "Perfection is an illusion," they said firmly. "Even we as a society have faced challenges in our history. Challenges we overcame through adaptation and growth. Humanity's journey mirrors our own, albeit on a different scale. By dismissing their imperfections, we deny ourselves the opportunity to learn from their resilience," another council member interjected. "But doesn't their tendency toward violence pose a risk? How can we trust them if they cannot fully control their impulses?" This time, Rin stepped forward, surprising everyone. "Trust isn't built on perfection," she said, her voice steady. "It's built on effort. Humans may struggle with aggression, but they also strive for peace. Their efforts, however imperfect, deserve recognition." The debate continued for hours, with Kale and their supporters defending their perspective against traditionalist views. Though tensions ran high, there were moments of breakthrough. One young scholar admitted that humanity's story challenged their assumptions about progress, while another expressed admiration for the species' ability to find beauty in adversity. By the end of the session, the council reached a tentative agreement. While they wouldn't fully endorse the revised report, they agreed to include its insights alongside existing analyses. This compromise allowed for a more balanced portrayal of humanity, one that acknowledged both their flaws and their potential. In the days that followed, Kale found themselves reflecting on the impact of their mission. Though change within the Valeth collective would take time, seeds of understanding had been planted. Several scholars approached Kale privately, thanking them for broadening their perspective. Even Tara, who had once dismissed humanity outright, admitted that Kale's arguments had forced her to reconsider certain biases. Inspired by these developments, Kale decided to continue advocating for deeper connections with other species. They proposed creating a new program focused on interstellar diplomacy, emphasizing empathy and collaboration over judgment and fear. To their delight, the proposal gained traction, with many scholars recognizing the value of learning from others' experiences. Months later, as Kale stood before a star map in the observatory, they felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The lights of distant planets twinkled like promises, each one holding untold stories waiting to be discovered. Humanity's light, though faint compared to the vastness of space, shone brightly in Kale's mind, a reminder that even the smallest spark could ignite change. Through their journey, Kale had learned more than just about humanity. They had discovered something essential about themselves. Imperfection wasn't weakness. It was strength. It was the fuel for growth. the catalyst for connection, and the foundation of hope. And as long as beings dared to dream, no challenge was insurmountable. Kyle smiled softly, tracing a finger along the map until it rested on Earth's coordinates. Someday, they thought, humanity might join the stars, not just as observers, but as partners in shaping a brighter future for all. Until then, Kale vowed to keep sharing their story, ensuring that humanity's light continued to inspire across galaxies. For in the end, it wasn't about being perfect. It was about being brave enough to try.